We should address the elephant in the room. I didn't want to start with this. I know it made most sense to do that, but I know it's going to be a downer. But there's no other way to bring it up than to just address it. Sadly, we finally lost Mongo, and it happened yesterday when I shared the news with Jeff Jarrett. He texted me back, "Praise God." Mongo's been in the fight of his life for a few years now. You really helped him get his start. I don't think a lot of people have even put this together, but he's the original Pat McAfee. If social media and streaming and all of that would have existed back then, and some of our listeners may not even know this, but he was an award winning radio show host. He had a very successful radio program built on the back of his football career in the NFL. And then he parlayed that as an opportunity to get into the wrestling business. And he did quite well there. And I know that over the years, people have poked fun and said, oh, he wasn't the best wrestler. As a reminder, he was trained for one match, a single solitary match. And then after that successful match, they just put him on the road as a regular wrestler after one match. That's not normal, but he had enough charisma to pull it off. And he's finally in the NFL Hall of Fame where he belongs. And now no more pain, no more hurt. He's got the great reward. Tell us about Steve Mongo McMichael, Eric.
Just such a fun guy. And people asked me yesterday a lot, do you have any Mongo stories? I really don't. Steve and I were introduced to each other through Harvey Schiller. Harvey Schiller was the one who was president of Turner Sports who came to me and said, hey, I ran into Steve McMichael or his agent, whatever. He'd really like to talk to you about, coming on as a commentator. And of course, I knew who Steve was, having lived in Minnesota and being a Vikings semi-fan for a long time, really well aware of Steve and all of his accomplishments. So I was excited to meet Steve. I didn't have any idea what he was like in terms of his personality and how he would come off on camera, but I met with him and we just hit it off instantly over lunch. Such a down-to-earth guy, no bullshit, just straight, honest, look you in the eye, tell you exactly how he feels. And he wasn't a bully. He was very gentle. He was a quiet guy. And he was married to Deborah at the time. And especially early on, whenever Lori was with me, the four of us would meet after the show and watch the replay in the bar with everybody else. So I really spent a lot of time with Steve and his then wife, Deborah, and got to know him pretty well. And so did Lori. And when we went to Sturgis, for example, it was Steve on his Harley and Deborah on the back. And I, of course, had Lori. Sometimes I'm one of the kids. Lori would switch off with Garrett, and Garrett would switch off with Montana, and then Lori would get back on. So I kind of shuttled my whole family out to Sturgis on the back of a Harley. But at night, we would get together, and we had a motor home, and as did Steve. But we would get together in one of our motor homes and just sit around after riding all day. This is my best memory of Steve, is on that ride. And once it was all over, to get into our campground or wherever we were staying, sometimes it was a hotel, and just sit around and talk about the day and the experience. It was just so much fun. And he fit in so well with everybody. I mean, he was universally liked and respected immediately. He didn't have that, oh, he's a celebrity, so we have to be nice to him thing. People just gravitated to him instantly because he was a genuine guy. He had no airs. He didn't carry himself like he was more important or bigger, or he didn't even, you would have never known he was a celebrity or a Super Bowl winner or anything if you just met him. He was just a nice guy from Texas, and he had an amazing sense of humor. He's such a fun guy. I thought back on that a lot last night, about those times in particular. The one, I'll just let it go with that. He was a wonderful guy. He really found his faith. I reposted something last night that Steve said not long ago that I really found touching. And I'm happy for Steve that he's out of pain. Happy for his wife, Misty, and the team of people that took such great care of him. Grateful for them, and happy that Steve's in better hands and out of pain, because he was trapped in a body that I'm sure he struggled with. But and that's the other thing about Steve. You look at the pictures of him, even when he was sick. I remember I was at a convention like 2 years ago with, and Ric Flair was there, and Booker T was backstage. It was like 4 or 5 of us from WCW when Steve was there. We're all backstage having a sandwich or whatever we were doing, waiting. You know how Rick is. Let's call Steve. And sure enough, he called Misty, and she put him on, his wife, and she put Steve on the phone. And Steve's telling jokes. Man, he's cracking jokes while he's fighting for his life. And last night I said he's the toughest man I've ever known. That's what I mean. I mean, he was obviously tough, physically tough as a man. But the mental and spiritual toughness of this man, I don't know. I've never met anybody like him. So I pray for him, and I'm glad he's resting.
One of the all-time best. He was a man's man, a super fun guy. We used to have him on Ric Flair's podcast. And even when you were talking about being backstage and Flair saying, let's call Mongo, we were in Chicago for that fundraiser, Money for Mongo, Eric, at our Top Guy Weekend event when he did that. And Rick jumped at the chance to be there for Steve. And I know that, you know, Rick has his fair share of critics, and a lot of that is deservedly so online. But man, he was a champion for Steve McMichael in a big way from day one, was he not?
He was. And, you know, look, just like the rest of us, Rick is not without his critics.
Sure.
But when Rick is loyal to you, and it's sometimes a hard thing to pin down on him, but Rick had a loyalty to Steve from the very beginning, and a respect. And I think that's where it all starts with someone like Ric Flair. Is ultimately it comes down to respect. And Rick had a ton of respect for Steve, and truly loved him. You know, it was kind of cool to watch that relationship evolve.
You know, I think everybody listening to this has at least heard me mention my best friend, Cassio Kidd. And when we did our very first StarCast in Chicago, I thought, well, we're doing a wrestling convention in Chicago. We got to have Mongo. Well, Cassio was assigned Mongo's table. So he was, you know, helping process the orders and take photos and all that. And they became fast friends. And he made, and I mean forced, Cassio try the Super Bowl ring on. I just thought it was so cool that he was so giving and understood what it was like to be a fan. And his fan interactions, I think, are legendary. And as we were recording this morning, I saw one that appeared on my timeline from yesterday that I wanted to share with everybody, because I think this sort of tells you who Steve was as a dude and as a fan and as a performer. There's an account on Twitter at ZEE8552 who tweeted, I was at a Bears event as a kid and I yelled at Steve McMichael, screw the Packers. He came over to me and put his hand on my shoulder and said, son, you shouldn't use that language. It's fuck the Packers. Shout out to Steve Mongo McMichael. Thoughts and prayers to him and his entire family. He will be missed.